I was a bit angry that all sorts of people come off social media and say, well, why wasn't William there? It wasn't William's message. It was her message, and it was right that she did it on her own.
Hello and welcome. I am Matt Wilkinson, Royal Editor. This is the latest episode of The Sun show Royal Exclusive. Today we have two experts providing a very unique perspective on all things royal. They are father and daughter, Dickie Arbiter and Victoria Arbiter. Guys, thanks so much for coming on. This is the first time we've had two guests.
Oh, so
Wow.
we're throwing in... Well, can I first of all thank you for not calling me Vicky? Because Dickie and Vicky, it's just too much. So already we're off to a good
Good.
start.
I wrote that myself, so I'm
you?
on to a winner already.
That's good. Well done.
Thanks.
Well done. You can carry on with the job.
Yeah.
Thank you. As I said, a unique perspective, because not just we've got two guests, but obviously father and daughter. But when we go into your background, I mean, unique perspective, you actually lived at Kensington Palace for a short period of time, or you grew up in the palace? How did that work?
I didn't grow up there. I'm glad you said that, because that has kind of become a bit of an urban legend that has taken hold. But I spent the latter part of my teens there. You were obviously living there much longer than I was, because
We lived there for 6 years.
Because you were the spokesman for...
I was a spokesman initially for the King when he was Prince of Wales, and late Diana, Princess of Wales, and then afterwards sort of full-time with the Queen.
Excellent. Well, armed with this knowledge and this background and these skills, should we delve into the Princess of Wales's video first? Because that was obviously the biggest news event of the last week or so. When I first watched that video, I have to admit, I felt a little bit choked up. To see the Princess of Wales for the first time in weeks, but also to hear her deliver so eloquently, you know, talking about the cancer treatment, but also having to speak to her children. How did you feel watching that video for the first time? I mean, it was very important to see her, but also the message that she got across coming from someone so important and so well known as the Princess of Wales.
Do you want to go first?
Should I go first?
You
Ladies
go
first? I'll go first.
Ladies first.
I was really struck, to be honest, Matt, by her eloquence, certainly, as you said, but her courage, her dignity and the grace. A lot of people behind the scenes talk about the Princess of Wales having an inner steeliness and an inner strength, which I think perhaps the general public is not quite so aware of, and we just saw it absolutely in every word that was delivered. But it felt incredibly personal too, and much was made right after about the fact that she had written it herself. You could see it was just so authentic, it was so genuine, it was so sincere. But I think where I really kind of felt that sort of gut reaction was right at the end, when she did what royals do so eloquently, which is when she turned it away from her own story and she talked about other cancer sufferers and she said, "You are not alone." And I think that's the part that, of course, you know, her children as well, but being able to use her story to speak to others and offer hope, comfort and reassurance to other people. I thought it was a fantastically well done speech.
It was a very brave thing to do because it's a shock to the system to be told that you have a cancer. We don't know what cancer it is, but it is a cancer nevertheless. So it was a shock to the system, and to sit there in front of a camera and tell people, tell the world, in fact, that she has a cancer, that she's undergoing preventative chemo, and that she hopes, and she does feel stronger, and she feels that she's getting better. That's what she told her children. And it was important for her to tell the children. I was a bit angry that all sorts of people come off social media and say, well, why wasn't William there? It wasn't William's message. It was her message, and it was right that she did it on her own. And as Victoria said, the fact that she swung it away from her and to people who are in the same circumstances, it was an incredible thing to do, and unfortunately it brought an element of negativity. But let's just push that to one side, because people who talk negatively about that sort of thing just really haven't got a life. They need to get a life, probably need therapy about it.
You know what else she did, actually? And Matt, you sort of see her out on the beat sort of more often, certainly, than we do. But it's no secret that she doesn't love public speaking, or it's something that she has worked at over her many years as a member of the royal family. But I don't know, confidence isn't quite the right word, but perhaps grace under fire. The way she delivered it was just impeccable.
It was personal, wasn't it?
It was personal. It was really
there
personal.
There was nothing contrived about it. You didn't get any impression that she was reading off an auto cue. It was her message. It was spoken from the heart, deep from the heart. and she was explaining what she's got. She was explaining that they have consolidating, and she had to tell the children first, and the children didn't break up until Friday, and it was right to do it then rather than pass on the message and then them having to go to school the following day. So they've got this sort of 3 weeks until the 17th of April when they go back to school to be together as a family and to come to terms with what she has.
The timing's really interesting, as you say, that we know that the palace has said that they released it on Friday because the children had just returned from school and they wanted to huddle together, you know, on holiday for a couple of weeks. But it obviously came at a time. The palace said that they would only release significant updates. Okay, back in January they said, well, this was a significant update, or was she almost forced into doing it by all the speculation? The wild conspiracy theories, which I don't really want to delve and give airtime to some of the crazy stuff that people were claiming, but there was obviously lots of speculation about what was actually happening to her, etc., etc. Was she forced into it, or was this just the palace saying now's the right time to make the statement?
I believe it was the right time to make the statement because the king, having not personally said, but released through Buckingham Palace, that he has a cancer and he's undergoing treatment, and slowly ramping up his engagements by being seen a bit more often in the palace with groups of people. And now we're going to see him at Easter, on Easter Sunday, going to church. And it was the right decision because the palace did say the day after she had the operation, she had an abdominal operation, there won't be any updates. She is in hospital for 2 weeks. She is going to be off until after Easter. And because we're now approaching Easter, it was right that they say, well, she's not going to be operating after Easter because she has a cancer and she's undergoing preventative chemo. So it was the right time. Yes, there was a lot of mischief making and conspiracy. We're not going to get into that on social media. It was nasty stuff, and anybody would be hurt by the sort of stuff that's coming out. But no, they make the decision. They make the decision in the right way. It's a bit like the late Queen. She worked by instinct. She wasn't forced into doing things. I'm going to briefly touch when she paid tribute to Diana in 1997 on the eve of the funeral. To her, that was the right time to do it. People get the mourning out of their system, and then she pays tribute to Diana, and it was the right thing to do because after she'd done it, people who were out in the precinct watching it on television, and the doors were open when she was filming it, and it was live, they applauded. So I think the Princess of Wales also working by instinct, getting the family priorities right, getting it to the children first, then getting it out to the wide world.
It's really interesting, and I like that idea that you were there, you were working obviously around that time, that there was a lot of pressure for the Queen to come out with that statement, and it was so important. There was a lot of pressure. Well, there was a lot of pressure for the Princess of Wales to make that statement. But we also talk about the charities. So the charities have had a huge amount of hits on their websites and stuff like that. This does show a kind of power that the royal family do to shed a light on certain issues, doesn't it?
It's a fantastic positive element to come out of what is a very difficult set of news to digest, I suppose. We saw the same with the King when he talked about going in to be treated for a prostate enlargement. It's a condition that a huge number of men struggle with and suffer from, but they're too embarrassed or they're too nervous, they're too scared to go to the doctor, they don't make time to go to the doctor. And there was a dramatic increase. The same happened with Sarah, Duchess of York, when she talked about her breast cancer last year, again when she addressed her skin cancer this year. And I think that really, not only does it allow, I suppose, members of the public to relate to members of the royal family, because the outpouring of sympathy has been dramatic since this news was revealed, but it does in turn inspire and encourage people, because cancer is a disease clearly that does not discriminate. And if the King can be suffering from something, well then it's okay for me to go and see the doctor because here he is talking about it in a public arena. So in looking for the positives, I suppose that is one of them, and I think the Princess of Wales will have been very aware. There were also subtle messages. Some people will know that daffodils are the symbol of the Macmillan Cancer Trust. She was sitting on a bench in front of daffodils when she delivered that message as well. So there's sort of all sorts of symbolism that was in that message.
And she's Princess of Wales as well, so the daffodils, I think, really
Yeah, as Victoria rightly says, if the royal family can talk about it and do something about it, then that's a very clear message to the great British public and people throughout the world. Don't hide it. If you feel there's a problem, go and deal with it. Because by not dealing with it, you're increasing the likelihood that you are going to get something that is not curable. And by the King doing that, first of all, going in for enlarged prostate, and then Buckingham Palace announcing that he has a cancer, was exactly the right thing to do. It sends out all the right messages to the population as a whole throughout the world. And likewise with the Princess of Wales, getting her priorities right, as I mentioned a moment ago, talking to the family first, talking to the children, and then telling everybody what is wrong and what sort of treatment she's getting, and that she is getting stronger and she hopes to be back soon.
You touched on it earlier about the late Queen's speech after the death of Diana, but what is the process? How does it come about that this, from your experience, how do we reach the stage where the Princess of Wales is delivering this video? There must be a lot of meetings. Does the royal member of the family decide themselves? We know that Kate, as you pointed out, wrote this herself. What happens in previous times where you've worked in it? How does this normally work?
Well, in previous times, I mean, we use the example, and I use the example of the Queen's tribute to Diana on the eve of the funeral. She was up at Balmoral. She was being castigated by every newspaper under the sun in the UK for remaining there and not being in London. What she would have done in London with tens of thousands of people mourning is, who knows? But she was up there at Balmoral. She was caring for her grandchildren, William at the time 15, Harry at the time 12, and they needed her because she's dealt with death in the family and she's able to counsel them and understand what they're going through and help them overcome the trauma of losing their mother. And she decided early on, yes, there was a clamour by newspapers, she's got to say something now, which was on the Monday, the day immediately after the death of Diana. No, she does things by instinct. She's not going to be bullied in, and wasn't bullied into doing things. The eve of the funeral was exactly the right time to do it because people's minds were focused on the day after the funeral. They had got out of their system the death of Diana, Princess of Wales, and were just there as a means of showing support, not just for Diana, Princess of Wales, who died so tragically on the Sunday, but also for the royal family.
But I think sorry, Matt, I don't mean to interrupt, but I think where Matt's going with this is that William and Kate will have probably decided together that it was a right time to give the message, because you were saying about timing, and certainly it was the right time in terms of the public were clamouring ahead of Easter when people are expecting her. I think people thought when Kensington Palace said she'll be back after Easter, they meant Easter Monday. When she knew she wasn't going to be able to, she had to come right back out. But it was interesting, Harold Macmillan said many, many years ago about the late Queen that she means to be queen and not a puppet. And I think William has very much taken that same ethos. He is not going to give in to the demands of the public saying we need this on their schedule, because then it sets a precedent of how things have to be done. So I think really what would have happened is that William and Kate will have decided together, this is what we want to do. Then you go to the team and say, this is what we want to do. How do we facilitate this? And they're there to support. And the reason I bring that up, Matt, is because particularly in the US, so many people have said, oh, I feel a little bit bad about what I said. I'm embarrassed and I feel cruel that I got in on the memes and I was joking with everyone else. But the Palace comms dropped the PR. It was almost like the Palace made me do it and that's why I behaved badly. And so I think really this is a lovely opportunity actually to say that it's not the Palace comms that are pulling all the strings and determining what William and Catherine do. It's William and his wife leading the charge in terms of what they feel ready to do. They're the principals.
And we forget sometimes, sorry.
They decided they wanted to do it. They had fixed on a date when to do it, which was after the children had broken up from school and Mum had explained to them what was wrong. They felt that was the right time. They told their comms team, this is what we want to do, facilitate it.
But do we forget sometimes that this is essentially a family? We call it a firm. Do you know what I mean?
You're right. People do forget that it's a family. Yes, King George VI coined the phrase "the firm," and I suppose, you look at it overall, it is the firm because it is the firm of monarchy PLC. But it is a family, and it's a family that suffers the same traumas and the same misunderstandings as anybody else. I mean, thousands of people are diagnosed with cancer. As Victoria said a while ago, there are no distinctions between whether it's a royal family, a big businessman, or you and I. We're all susceptible to it.
You mentioned about the US, which you work a lot in the States. How's this gone down stateside? I mean, obviously the PR disaster with the Mother's Day photo has played badly both sides of the Atlantic. But How has it gone down with, I think there's people like Stephen Colbert and there's other celebrities and members of the public that have been quite insulting to the Princess of Wales. Has there been a changing attitude since this video?
I think there's been an element of shame. Matt, I have to say, actually, I've been appalled at how the coverage unfolded. It's a very big year in the US politically, and there are a huge number of problems domestically. Migrant crisis at the border. Of course, now we're ramping up to the election, and with that comes a lot of animosity and a lot of headbutting. And I think the royal family sometimes serves as a little bit of a distraction, and it can be viewed on occasion as a bit of a soap opera. And I think people just forgot their humanity in the process, and it became almost a game of topping. And I think it's presented quite an interesting fork in the road for mainstream media, because it's one thing for us to say this is what's happening on social media, but what is it when social media is informing the news? And so this hashtag, where is Kate Middleton, falling down the rabbit hole, the celebrities really started to get in on that. And Blake Lively actually did issue an apology. It was probably the most sincere apology of all of them. But there were mainstream media personalities who people look to for truth and authenticity and accuracy, using words like missing and disappeared. And I thought that was quite insidious, because that's giving legitimacy to those conspiracy theories and validating them in a way, which then enabled other personalities to really get in on the action. So where before it might have been kind of your D-list celebrities, we're talking about the morning show hosts, trickling then into the news magazine shows that are on in the afternoon, then going into the late night comics. I think overall they recognise that they behaved appallingly. There have been some apologies. Some are a bit more sincere than others. Some have qualified it with, well, I'm sorry about this, but a cancer diagnosis never should get a but in my book. But I hope that it gives them pause moving forwards, because going back to your point, I think particularly in the US, where they're often just seeing photographs, the royals are seen as sort of two-dimensional figures that are devoid of human emotion, devoid of feelings, considered to be tremendously privileged. Why should we feel sorry for them? And I don't think the royals ever ask for anybody's pity. They're sharing their stories in a very brave fashion. But I think there's quite a few people who could still stand to apologise. But I think they were very impressed with the princess's delivery.
Right.
Yeah.
It was a shameful episode. It's been a shameful couple of weeks, and I hope people learn lessons, end the era of conspiracy theory and start trusting, the mainstream media. But based on your experience, how do you think Kate and William coped, and how do you think they would have been feeling before, when all the abuse was happening, and then after they've made the video? How do you think the members of the royal family would actually deal with this?
Well, they would have been feeling incredibly upset with all these conspiracy theories and all these sort of innuendos coming out of social media. And I'm not going to differentiate which social media. It's social media, the lot, as a platform. And I suppose there are those who will say, well, they were forced into issuing the video last week. No, they weren't. They wanted to get the message out loud and clear that she does have a cancer and she's not going to be back after Easter, as was hoped right at the beginning when she had the operation. But they would have been feeling upset and angry that intelligent people, you think they're intelligent anyway, could come out with such theories. I mean, a BBC sports reporter coming out after The Sun released that video of William and Catherine at the Windsor Farm Shop. She's saying it's a body double. I mean, how outrageous is that? Just to come out because everybody else is having a conspiracy theory on the social media, so I might as well join them as well. Has there been an apology? Of course not. Has there been an apology from the BBC? Of course not.
But it was because she's got BBC there, that's what I mean about the validation. So one of the morning magazine shows in the US, you've got 5 hosts that all have a news background, and one of them actually said on air, she said, well, all the royals have body doubles for security purposes. And she went, I read it. And it's
Dickie, do they have body doubles?
I haven't seen any.
But this is why it sort of spiraled out of control. And Matt, I'm so glad you raised William in particular, because I think if we look at him for just a moment, in a relatively short space of time, he lost both his paternal grandparents, whom he was very close to. The Queen was a tremendous mentor over the years. His father was diagnosed with cancer. His brother left the royal family in an acrimonious fashion. They're still at odds. He's trying to bring up 3 young children. Now, he's a dad. He does not get a medal for raising his 3 young children.
That's his job.
That's his job. You know, we're not going to give him a pass on that. But he's also conducting his role as the heir to the throne. He's having to hold down all his royal responsibilities while caring for his wife, while maintaining the emotional stability for his children. It is a lot to bear for one person. And yes, privilege does afford you some help behind the scenes, but that doesn't take away the emotional strain of everything that he's dealing with. And so I think sometimes people just assume that, oh, he's fine, he's fine, he's fine. But I think when you put it all on paper, everything that he's going through, and yet still, the London Ambulance charity night was a fantastic night. He was joking with Tom Cruise. He then went and conducted all his other engagements and was so focused on other people, had a smile on his face, did the job that was expected of him, and yet then when you think of the emotional turmoil that he was going through, I think he does deserve the credit.
I mean, when you think last week he was up in Sheffield, just days before that video was released, and you would never believe for a moment the way that he was engaging with the people there, that he had the weight of this video on his mind, the 100%. Weight of his wife's cancer on his mind.
I was there and he was on great form, and you wouldn't have known. No. What they were saying there, and it was obvious, was how plugged in he was to that Sheffield event. It was about his homeward scheme, and there was a chap in there who's really nice. I don't know if it made much coverage, but he was telling him about his life, and he spoke to his aide afterwards and said, I need that guy's number. You know, I need that. He was a man who had been to jail, been homeless, had drugs and drinks problems, and he walked out and he said, please get me that guy's number. I want to get him on board and stuff like that. You know,
the one thing with William, everything that he does, he's plugged into. He knows exactly where he's going. He knows the people he's going to be meeting. He knows their background. So he doesn't go with, who are you, what do you do, sort of thing. He knows exactly what he's doing. And that's why he's so personable, why he can engage with people at every level, and why he was so good, as you saw last week, engaging with people in Sheffield.
I'm so glad, though, Matt, that you raised that too, because that's a perfect illustration of who he is. And those are the stories, unfortunately, that people don't hear. When we were living at Kensington Palace, Diana, Princess of Wales, was going out late at night and giving money. I mean, I hope it's not inappropriate to say, but she would go and ladies of the night that were working, and she would give them money and say, don't work tonight, go home. These are the types of things that are never reported. It's these personal moments behind the scenes. And so for William to do that, that is something that he will follow through on. And that's what will then make such a significant difference in that man's life. And it kind of goes back to the Prince's Trust, doesn't it? That's why then Prince of Wales, Prince Charles, started the Prince's Trust, because it was people that were down on their luck, having alcohol problems, had come out of prison, had no opportunities ahead for them. And so that somehow sort of William carrying through both his parents' legacy.
Which is why William is so focused on the homeless, because his mother took him out at night to see how the homeless were coping. And that would have been in his teens, and it would have been firmly imprinted in his mind. And knowing what his father did, starting, as Victoria said, the Prince's Trust, he started it in 1976 when he came out of the Navy. That was an organisation to help young people. To say that young people in the UK don't know anything about the monarchy, which is absolute rubbish, because they know exactly. They know how the Prince's Trust, for example, does help young people. Look at Idris Elba, actor, well known. I mean, he's never off our screens. He was given £1,500 to go to drama school. That's the sort of thing that the Prince's Trust did. Help young entrepreneurs, help young people who've got talent to further that talent by helping them go to drama school. Help young people who've got an entrepreneurial idea to start the business and show an element of success. Show young people who are young offenders how they can make way in their life without offending. And it has worked. It worked. Certainly when I was Prince of Wales, the King's Press Secretary, he had a camp at Caister, Great Yarmouth, for young people, a mix of young offenders. They went in at the beginning of the week, surly, well, I don't know why I'm here and I don't want to cooperate. But by the end of the week, they were cooperating with each other. They were a team of people. And when Charles arrived, then as Prince of Wales, they were all over him like a rash. They thought he was the greatest thing, having given this opportunity, and William does exactly the same.
It's interesting to bring up the King. I mean, we look at the family at the moment and they are kind of relying more and more on each other. There's a smaller family at the moment, but we know, for instance, that Princess of Wales had lunch with Charles just the day before she released her video statement, and Camilla's been there consistently. You know, she's got loads of jobs this week and she's representing the King, I think, on Maundy Thursday. How important is it that, you know, the royal family seem to be a lot closer at the moment? Kate and the King are meeting for lunch, and Camilla's lending support. How good is it for them to lean on each other, particularly with the cancer diagnosis? Both the King and Kate now, you know, have their cancer diagnosis. They can actually lean on each other as members of the family. How important is that?
Oh, I think it's huge, Matt. Any kind of life-threatening illness does tend to reset perspective. It makes you regroup and come together. And actually, I loved the footage of William and the Queen at the Commonwealth Day service. You could see that there was a warm rapport. I think relations have certainly, time is a great healer, and relations have thawed. And I think there is tremendous comfort in leaning on each other. A lot is made about the King's desire for a slimmed-down monarchy in the lead-up to his accession. There was a natural slimming down that I think he hadn't even anticipated it being quite so slim. And because it is so slim at the moment, we see the frailties, we see the vulnerabilities, and so it has led to this sensational headline saying, monarchy in crisis, monarchy doomed, monarchy on the cusp of ending. It is utter hogwash. I think what we are seeing at the moment is just a very different setup. But when we look back over history, the monarchy has survived divorce, abdication, death, reformation, scandal, all manner of things. It will survive this too. It is just a very different setup at the moment, but I think it is one that will bring this family even tighter together. We're seeing the support, whether it's through the Duke and Duchess of Edinburgh. I loved seeing Sophie pay such a heartfelt tribute to Prince Edward for his 60th birthday. We haven't really seen that before. Princess Anne, of course, is a Trojan warrior.
It was a tactile approach, wasn't it?
Oh, it was fantastic.
I mean,
and she
hugging
was
her
really
husband.
emotional.
Have you ever seen a member of the royal family hugging each other in public? No.
Well,
I mean,
we've seen
it at
William
weddings.
and Kate. We've seen the younger ones.
Yeah, but we saw at marriages, we saw them kissing on the balcony. But with Sophie there, actually putting her arms round Edward's neck and they were hugging. That is very rare.
He looked really touched, and then I think, you know, Princess Anne, you can depend on her for anything. I mean, she could probably single-handedly run the monarchy. She's so good at it. But yes, Matt. So I think. I'm glad you raised this because it gives us an opportunity to kind of put it in perspective. And the doom mongers love to say, because it's negativity sells and algorithms respond to it, that the monarchy is doomed. But it's simply not the case. And I think there's been encouraging words from the British public. There's been tremendous support. The outpouring on social media from other world leaders, from charity organisations, from the military. I think it just shows how behind the royal family everybody is.
I remember in 1992, at the time of the Annus Horribilis, everybody was writing at the end of the year, well, the monarchy is doomed, it's not going to survive. Did it survive? Of course it survived. At 1997, with the death of Diana, Princess of Wales, Queen and Prince Philip remaining at Balmoral, not in London, and no tribute until the eve of the funeral. And everybody was saying, oh, the monarchy is doomed. If they can't be there for us at such a moment of crisis, then what's the point of it? It's irrelevant. And yet it survived. As Victoria said, it's survived for 1,000 years. Wars, deaths, garrotting, beheading, abdication, you name it, it's survived.
And that was just in Spare.
Yeah,
That was just in Harry's book.
Well, it survived that too.
Yeah. But no, it's a little bit of a crisis, but, you know, it's clearly...
I think crisis is a bit too strong a word.
I think.
Yeah, it's...
Where does it rank? The King's off. We will see him at Easter, actually, but the King's off with cancer. The Princess of Wales is struggling. Harry is obviously miles away, you know, throwing insults. Prince Andrew is never to be seen again. I mean, it is... We are, you know, they're not doomed, but it is a little bit of a crisis.
It's not in crisis, it's challenging.
Challenging.
Challenging, they begin with the same letter, but don't mean exactly the same. The King, yes, he has a cancer. He's going to be seen on Easter Day at Windsor Castle, at St George's Chapel, leading the family. Buckingham Palace is going to slowly ramp up where he's going to be seen in public. They've made that very clear. We saw the King just only yesterday. He was meeting a group of faith leaders which was important because it wasn't just one, there were about a dozen there. And there he was at this meeting. So they will ramp up his engagements. It's going to be slow because traditionally nothing has actually happened in April. Easter Court has always been at Windsor. Traditionally, the Queen did very little in terms of engagements. Yes, there'd be Maundy Thursday. Well, Queen Camilla will be doing that on behalf of the King tomorrow. They will be at the church service on Sunday. And I think by the time we get to the end of April, we'll be hearing of some engagements that the King is actually going to do because people want to see him. He is frustrated. As head of state, he is fulfilling what he is supposed to do constitutionally. He's got his red boxes, government papers he's signing off on, he's initialing them. He is having audiences with high commissioners and incoming ambassadors, Privy Council meetings, audiences with his Prime Minister, Chancellor of the Exchequer. Those are constitutional duties that he's doing behind the scenes at Buckingham Palace. People want to see him now in his role as head of nation, out and about, meeting the people. He wants to do that. But until the medical advisors say, OK, fine, you can do it, but in moderation, we're going to have to accept that he's going to fulfilling his constitutional role and just have to be a little bit patient for him to come back.
I think also, perhaps as well why it's challenging, good word, Dad, challenging versus in crisis, is that the current problems are illness-driven. It's not scandal-driven. And I think there's a point where we have to let go of Prince Harry and Prince Andrew in our discussions for the monarchy because they no longer work for the monarchy. There's a point where I wonder if we're ever going to be able to talk about the Princess of Wales without someone online going, yeah, well, but what about the Duchess of Sussex? You know, there's got to be a point at some...
There's got to be a cut-off.
There's got to be a cut-off at some stage because Harry and Meghan have clearly decided to make their lives in the US. Prince Andrew doesn't go anywhere. He doesn't do anything, which is quite right. Nobody wants to see him anyway. He's probably about to have a bit of a wobble with Scoop coming out. I'm sure he would rather that...
Another challenge.
That is another challenge because I think there's going to be more people that watch Scoop perhaps than saw the original Newsnight interview. So that's going to bring another whole chunk of aggro to him because, of course, this is a dramatisation as well. It's not a documentary. But I think when something is illness-driven, there is sympathy from the public versus the outrage that comes from a scandal. And I think that's why it's challenging versus in crisis.
I think there was also a few eyebrows raised at the time of King Constantine's memorial service at St George's Chapel when Andrew was out front. Nobody in the family is going to say, excuse me, back of the queue, please.
I wish someone had... The Princess Anne should have been the one to say, off you go.
I was there, and when Andrew came bowling down the hill at the front, looking happy and delighted, I literally turned to an aide and said, what on earth is he doing at the front, leading the family? And they said, no, he's at the back because it's reverse order. And I said, well, the readers aren't going to understand that nuance. So, I mean, Easter Sunday, I've asked, is he going to be there on Easter Sunday? I kind of think they might not invite him on Sunday, but it is incredibly important, I think, at this stage. Do you agree that the King needs to be seen?
Yeah.
And he will be there on Sunday?
He needs to be seen. He'll probably be driven there. And he'll get out the car and he will make a point of waving at whoever is there. And occasionally they allow people in. Certainly the reporters will be in and photographers will be in, but he will make a point of waving, saying, you know, I'm OK.
Matt's absolutely right, though, isn't he? When you say, because it's optics, unfortunately. And when the picture's there, and as you rightly say, you've got Andrew and Fergie supposedly leading the pack, or certainly that's what it looked like. Of course, the headlines the next day were, oh, my goodness, who does he think he is? We don't want to see him leading the royal family. It's only people that really follow the monarchy that are going to know about the reversed order.
Nobody understands that.
No.
Nobody understands that.
Well, if you were there, you would have understood, Dickie.
Oh, if I'd been there, I would have hauled him to the back.
Could you go on Easter Sunday and have a placard and just say reverse order on it?
Yeah, this is...
No, I would have made sure he was at the back. In the same way he did that dreadful interview in November 2019. The ComSec, Buckingham Palace, wasn't anywhere to be seen. And anybody worth their salt would know the line this is taking, would stop it immediately, would create a story, doesn't matter. This has created a bigger story and actually wiped him out in terms of being a representative of the royal family.
Wouldn't have happened on your watch.
Wouldn't have happened on my watch, no.
On your watch. Well, what a shame. Well, what a shame you're not there. You know, you could take control. And
oh, they don't need crusty old people like me.
Well, although it's ironic, really, isn't it? Because when Dad retired, at the time there was a mandatory age of retirement, which was ironic, really, given how old the Queen and Prince Philip, as his bosses were. I think they could stand to, I think they're doing a good job given everything that's been thrown at them. And I think also what viewers perhaps don't know, which I think would be helpful to know, is so often the comms team get blamed for everything, but you can only tell your principals no so many times. The principals are ultimately driving. You had this with Diana,
And a number of
Princess
times
Wales.
I did that, but they're
They're going to
driving
do what
at
they
the
want to
end.
do.
They're going to do, yeah, they are. They're a bit better now, but in my day, when looking after the King and Diana, it was a nightmare.
And
People
if you
used to
gave her
say-
the wrong answer, she'd get cross with you and not speak to you.
Yeah,
for a
she'd
few
not speak
days.
to me. If she'd ask advice about doing something. It was an occasion when we had a meeting. She said, I want to have a reception for the England football team. And I said, a great idea, but why? They lost. I said, and before she could take a breath and argue with me, I said, do you really want to be associated with losers? And she saw the sense of that, but she wouldn't talk to me for 2 weeks.
Well, but also you said to her, do you remember you said, if you do this for the football team, you set a precedent.
Oh,
What
yeah.
about the cricket team, the rugby team,
Oh, yeah,
the hockey
I
team?
rattled off every sports team,
Yeah.
and she saw the sense of that.
But she didn't talk to you for a week.
No, she wouldn't talk 2 weeks. And then she phoned up and said, can you do X, Y, Z? I said, oh, are we talking again? And there would be a giggle and we'd be on a roll again.
What we're going to have to do is you two are going to have to come back on, and I want to hear loads of those stories. I want a whole episode of Dickie stories when you were working back at the Palace.
All right.
Does that sound a good idea?
That sounds a
We
pretty
should
good
do.
idea.
He's
We're gonna
got
get
some
in the
crackers
diary.
because also he was I'll say this because he's too humble. He was the only member of staff she ever threw a personal birthday party for as well. They had a great relationship.
50th birthday party. We had a cake. Do you remember the old brick telephone?
Yeah.
The chef made a brick telephone with a sparkler sticking out the top of it. And the icing said, you're never alone when Dickie's got his phone. And, I always had a telephone with me. But, yeah, there were helium balloons, party poppers. I had 20 people there. It was great. Terrific.
Nifty 50, the balloon said. So, yeah, she had a great...
And she got hauled out of school and she thought, oh, I'm in trouble. And she said, where are we going? I said, oh, we're going home. And instead of going home, we carried on straight up the private road. And then she suddenly realised where we were going.
Excellent.
Speechless for one of the few times in my life, Matt.
Excellent. Well, we've got to draw it to close, I'm afraid. And as I say, I think it'd be lovely to get you back on and talk about a little bit more the Kensington Palace and your work at with the Royals. I think that'd be a really lovely episode if you
we'd
guys
love
would
to.
be willing.
More than happy.
That sound good?
We'd love to. Thank you very much for having us today. It's been a
Thank
pleasure.
you, Matt.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. Right, well, thanks very much for watching. As I promised, a unique perspective on all things royal, and I think that's what we got there. If you enjoyed it, please click below, please subscribe for more content, and thank you very much for watching.